Standing before the esteemed medical board of the Terry Medical Institute, Dr. Rinna tried to control her nervously shifting tentacles. The soft blue glow from the holoscreen cast dancing shadows across her iridescent skin as she gestured at the endless stream of medical data scrolling behind her. The air in the chamber felt heavy with tension, made worse by the gentle humming of medical equipment that filled the otherwise silent room. The case of young Nix had consumed her thoughts for the past 3 cycles. Every time she looked at the child's medical scans, she felt a deep ache in her primary heart. Nix came from the Valor family, one of the most respected diplomatic houses in Terry society. Their influence stretched across 3 star systems, making this case not just a medical challenge but a political powder keg. As you can see from these neural scans, Rinna continued, her outer membrane rippling with professional concern. The damage to the locomotor system is extensive. She brought up a 3-dimensional image of Nix's neural pathways, where angry red lines highlighted the affected areas. The genetic mutation has caused severe disruption in the signal pathways between the brainstem and the lower appendages. The board members' tentacles twitched in unison as they studied the display. Elder Dr. Myra, her skin weathered and pale from centuries of medical service, leaned forward. "Have you attempted the new stem cell therapy from the Centauri Medical Exchange?" "Yes, Elder," Rinna replied, her skin flushing a deeper blue with frustration. "We've tried everything in our medical database. Stem cell therapy, neural regeneration, even experimental quantum healing. Nothing has shown any significant improvement." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "The mutation seems to adapt and resist each treatment we attempt." Young Nix's condition had first manifested shortly after birth. Unlike other Terry children who began walking on their tentacles within their first cycle, Nix remained immobile. The child could only drag themselves across the floor, their lower appendages limp and unresponsive. The sight of the once proud Valor family carrying their child everywhere had become a common source of whispered gossip in the capital's high society. Dr. Rinna brought up another set of scans, these taken just days ago. "The mutation is progressive. We're seeing increasing deterioration in the neural pathways. If we don't find a solution soon." She left the sentence unfinished, but everyone in the room understood the implications. The board members chittered amongst themselves, their skin patterns showing various shades of concern and disapproval. Assistant Director Q1, known for his conservative views, spoke up. "This is becoming a diplomatic embarrassment. The Valor family's position in the upcoming trade negotiations with the Proxima colonies is crucial. We cannot have their representative carrying a disabled child into diplomatic functions." Rinna felt her outer membrane heat with anger at Q1's callous words, but she maintained her professional composure. "With all due respect, Assistant Director, my primary concern is the child's well-being, not diplomatic appearances." Elder Mayra raised a tentacle, silencing the growing murmurs. "Dr. Rinna, you've been heading this case for nearly a full cycle now. What do you propose as our next step?" Taking a deep breath, Rinna brought up her final slide. "I believe we need to look beyond our traditional medical approaches. The mutation adapts too quickly to our advanced treatments. Perhaps," she hesitated, knowing her next words might shock the conservative board, "perhaps we need to consider consulting with other species, even those we might consider less technologically advanced." The reaction was immediate. Several board members' skin patterns flashed with alarm, while others withdrew their tentacles in clear disapproval. Assistant Director Q1's skin turned almost white with outrage. "Are you suggesting we admit defeat? Acknowledge that our superior medical technology has failed?" he demanded, his voice rising with each word. "I am suggesting," Rinna replied firmly, "that we put aside our pride and consider all options for the sake of this child." Elder Mayra studied Rinna for a long moment, her aged skin shifting through thoughtful patterns of blue and green. "You have something specific in mind, don't you, Doctor?" Rinna nodded, pulling up one final document on the holoscreen. "I've been researching similar cases across known space. There's an interesting report from a relatively new species that's shown remarkable progress in treating neural disorders, using what they call adaptive technology. They're called humans. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the medical equipment seemed to quiet down. Assistant Director Q1 looked like he might faint, his skin turning an unhealthy shade of gray. Elder Myra's expression remained unreadable as she considered the proposal. Finally, she spoke, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of medical wisdom. Dr. Rina, you understand what you're asking. The implications of bringing in outside help, especially from such a young species. I do, Elder, Rina replied steadily. But I also understand what's at stake if we do nothing. This isn't just about the Valor family's reputation anymore. This is about a child who deserves a chance to walk. The board chamber erupted into heated discussion, tentacles waving and skin patterns flashing in a spectacular display of emotion. As Rina watched the chaos unfold, she thought of young Nix, waiting at home with their family, hoping for good news. She knew this was just the beginning of what would likely be the biggest challenge of her medical career, but she was ready to fight for her patient, no matter the cost to her professional reputation. The future of one small child now hung in the balance, and with it, perhaps the future of Terry medicine itself. The lights of the medical research lab cast a soft glow over Dr. Rina as she pored through countless files in the interstellar medical database. Her tentacles moved swiftly across multiple holoscreens, each displaying different case studies from across known space. She had been at this for days, searching for anything that might help young Nix. The quiet hum of the lab's equipment was interrupted only by the occasional ripple of her skin patterns when she found something interesting. Most leads had proven useless, but she refused to give up. It was during her search through what seemed like the 1,000th medical report that something caught her attention. Neural interface prosthetics. She muttered to herself, her outer membrane flickering with curiosity. The report detailed successful treatments of similar neural conditions on Earth, using what the humans called adaptive technology. Unlike the complex biological solutions preferred by Terry medicine, the human approach combined simple mechanical devices with neural interfaces. As she dug deeper, more cases emerged. Children with paralyzed limbs walking again. Patients with severe nerve damage regaining movement. The results were impressive, especially considering humanity's relatively short time as a spacefaring civilization. The next few days became a blur of presentations and debates with the medical board. Assistant Director Q1 had opposed the idea at every turn, his skin practically glowing with indignation during each meeting. We cannot seriously consider bringing primitive human technology into our most prestigious medical facility, he had argued, his tentacles waving in agitation. What would the other medical institutions say? But Elder Myra had seen the potential. After reviewing the human case studies, she had given her crucial support to the proposal. Sometimes, she had said, her aged skin patterns showing wisdom. The simplest solution is the best solution. After weeks of political maneuvering and countless meetings, the board finally approved bringing in a human specialist. Dr. Hanbiel was selected based on her impressive record of successful treatments and her experience with interspecies medical cooperation. The day of Hanbiel's arrival brought more excitement to the Terry Medical Institute than it had seen in years. Staff members lined the corridors, their skin patterns showing various shades of curiosity and skepticism. When the transport ship landed, Dr. Rina waited at the arrival bay, trying to maintain a professional demeanor despite her nervousness. The human who stepped out of the ship was not what anyone expected. Dr. Hanbiel was shorter than the average human, wearing simple medical scrubs instead of the elaborate protective suits most species used around Terry. She carried just one small case of equipment, in stark contrast to the massive medical arrays that Terry were accustomed to. Dr. Rina, Hanbiel asked, smiling warmly and bowing slightly in greeting. Thank you for the invitation. I've been studying Nexus case files during my journey here. Rina's outer membrane flickered with surprise at the human's casual manner. Welcome to Terry Prime, Dr. Handwheel. We've prepared a full medical suite for your use, with all our advanced diagnostic equipment. Handwheel nodded, but her attention was already focused on a portable scanner she pulled from her case. This should be enough to start with. Would it be possible to meet Nix today? I prefer to begin with direct observation. The Terry medical staff watching the exchange chittered among themselves, their skin patterns showing clear disapproval at this unorthodox approach. Assistant Director Q1, who had insisted on being present, could barely contain his disdain. Surely you'll want to review our complete medical database first, he suggested, his tentacles twitching with barely concealed irritation. We have centuries of neural research available. Handwheel smiled again, seemingly unbothered by the assistant director's tone. With respect, sir, every patient is unique. While your research is valuable, I've found that meeting the patient first helps me understand their specific needs better. As they walked to the pediatric ward, Rina noticed how Handwheel studied everything with keen interest, asking practical questions about Terry physiology and medical practices. There was none of the arrogance she had expected from a visiting specialist, just genuine curiosity and a focus on helping her patient. When they reached Nix's room, the young Terry child was attempting to move across their bed, their lower tentacles dragging uselessly behind them. Handwheel's expression softened at the sight, and she approached slowly, kneeling to meet Nix at eye level. "Hello, Nix," she said gently, as Rina translated. "I'm Dr. Handwheel. Would you mind if I talked with you for a bit?" What followed amazed everyone present. Instead of immediately running scans or consulting data, Handwheel spent time simply talking with Nix, asking about their daily life, their challenges, their hopes. Her simple scanner remained unused in her pocket as she built rapport with the child. Later, in the medical conference room, Handwheel laid out her initial thoughts. "Your biological treatments are incredibly advanced," she acknowledged, "but they're fighting against the mutation's ability to adapt. What we need is a different approach entirely, one that works with the patient's existing neural pathways rather than trying to force new ones." As she explained her proposed treatment plan, even Assistant Director Q1 found himself leaning forward with interest. The human's practical approach, while different from their traditional methods, made surprising sense. Watching her new colleague work, Dr. Rina felt her initial worries fading, replaced by growing hope. Perhaps this unlikely solution was exactly what they needed, not just for Nix, but for the future of Terry medicine itself. In the main examination room of the Terry Medical Institute, Dr. Handwheel stood before a large holoscreen displaying Nix's neural patterns. The room was crowded with board members, their tentacles shifting restlessly as they watched the human doctor work. Dr. Rina stood nearby, her outer membrane showing patterns of nervous anticipation. Handwheel pointed to specific areas of the neural map, her movements precise and confident. "See these signal pathways? While your nervous system is more complex than ours, the basic principles of neural transmission remain the same. The problem isn't in the signals themselves, it's in their delivery." She brought up a second image, a basic diagram of human exoskeleton technology. Several board members' skin patterns flashed with disbelief at its apparent simplicity. Assistant Director Q1 couldn't contain his skepticism. "This looks like something from a primitive engineering class," he said, his tentacles curling with disdain. "How could such a basic device help where our advanced biotechnology has failed?" Handwheel remained calm, pulling up more detailed schematics. "Sometimes the most elegant solutions are the simplest ones. Your treatments have focused on fixing the neural pathways themselves. Instead, we can create new pathways, artificial ones that bypass the damaged areas entirely." The Voller family sat quietly in the corner of the room, their skin patterns showing a mix of hope and fear as they held their child. Young Nix watched the proceedings with bright eyes, their lower tentacles lying motionless beneath them. "The exoskeleton will act as an external neural network," Handwheel continued. "We'll need to modify it significantly to work with Terry physiology, of course." Dr. Rina's expertise in Terry biology will be crucial for this adaptation. Elder Myra moved forward, her aged tentacles gracefully gesturing at the displays. And how would this interface with Nyx's existing neural system? Hanbile brought up another diagram, this one showing the proposed connection points. We'll use microsensors at these key junctions. They'll read the neural signals from the functioning upper body and translate them into movement commands for the lower tentacles. The exoskeleton will provide both the physical support and the signal pathway. The room erupted in chittering discussions. Many board members' skin patterns showed alarm at the idea of connecting human technology directly to a Terry nervous system. Others displayed curiosity, their tentacles moving in thoughtful patterns. This has never been tested on a Terry before. One board member pointed out, their skin flashing morning colors. The risks are unknown. We've successfully adapted this technology for 17 different species, Hanbile responded. Each time, we modified the interface to match the specific biology of the patient. It's not about forcing your physiology to match our technology. It's about adapting our technology to work with your physiology. Nyx's parent, Ambassador Valur, finally spoke up. What are the chances of success? Their skin patterns showed the strain of months of watching their child struggle. Hanbile turned to face them directly. I can't promise miracles, Ambassador, but based on our success with similar neural conditions in other species, I believe we have a good chance of restoring significant mobility to Nyx's lower tentacles. The ambassador's outer membrane rippled with emotion. And the risks? The procedure is reversible, Hanbile assured them. If there are any complications, we can remove the interface immediately. The system also has multiple safety protocols built in. Dr. Rina stepped forward, her skin patterns showing strong support. I've reviewed Dr. Hanbile's previous cases. The success rate is remarkable, and there have been no serious complications in any of the cross-species adaptations. Assistant Director Q1 made one last attempt to object. This goes against centuries of Terry medical tradition. We cannot simply. Tradition will not help my child walk. Ambassador Valur interrupted, their skin patterns showing fierce determination. We approve the procedure. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Elder Myra, whose decision would be final. The ancient doctor studied the diagrams for several long moments, her skin shifting through thoughtful patterns. Sometimes, she finally said, progress requires us to step beyond our comfortable boundaries. Dr. Hanbile, you have my approval to proceed. Dr. Rina will assist and monitor the entire process. Hanbile nodded gratefully, then moved to kneel beside Nyx. Would you like to see how it works? She asked softly, as Rina translated. She pulled out a small model of the exoskeleton, sized for Nyx's proportions. The child's skin patterns lit up with excitement as Hanbile demonstrated how the device would help them move. For the first time since arriving at the facility, the human doctor's face broke into a wide smile. As the meeting dispersed, Dr. Rina noticed how the atmosphere in the room had shifted. Even the skeptical board members seemed affected by Nyx's obvious enthusiasm. Tomorrow, they would begin the complex process of modifying the exoskeleton for Terry physiology. But for now, there was something even more powerful filling the room. Hope. The fabrication lab of the Terry Medical Institute hummed with activity as Dr. Hanbile and Dr. Rina worked on their unique project. Holographic designs floated in the air around them, showing the complex interface between human technology and Terry biology. Tools and components littered the workbenches, creating an unusual mix of Earth-made devices and Terry medical equipment. The support structure needs to be more flexible here, Hanbile said, pointing to a section of the exoskeleton design. Her fingers moved through the hologram, adjusting the specifications. Terry tentacles have a much wider range of motion than human limbs. Dr. Rina's outer membrane flickered with agreement as she studied the modifications. The neural sensors will need to be adapted as well. Our nerve clusters are more densely packed than human ones. They had been working like this for weeks, often forgetting to take breaks. Empty food containers and stimulant beverages from both their worlds cluttered the corners of the lab. The walls were covered with anatomical diagrams comparing human and Terry nervous systems. A small crowd of Terry medical staff often gathered to watch them work, fascinated by the unusual collaboration. Today, Chief Engineer Su-min observed with obvious skepticism, his skin patterns showing disapproval at what he considered primitive technology. "Why not use our quantum neural interfaces?" he suggested, gesturing at the elaborate Terry medical equipment nearby. "They're far more sophisticated than these mechanical components." Han Biel paused her work, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Sometimes sophisticated isn't what we need. Watch this." She picked up a simple mechanical joint they had fabricated earlier. "This component has only one job: to move exactly like a Terry tentacle joint. It doesn't need to be complex. It just needs to work reliably, every time." She demonstrated the movement, showing how smoothly it matched natural Terry motion. Even Su-min's skin patterns showed reluctant interest. "The beauty of this system," Rin-Ah added, her tentacles moving excitedly, "is that it works with Nex's existing neural patterns instead of trying to create new ones. It's like building a bridge rather than trying to change the course of a river." They had made breakthrough after breakthrough, each small success bringing them closer to their goal. The neural interface had been particularly challenging, requiring them to completely redesign the human version to accommodate Terry biology. But Han Biel's practical approach, combined with Rin-Ah's deep knowledge of Terry physiology, proved to be a powerful combination. "Look at this," Han Biel said, bringing up a simulation of their latest design. The hologram showed how the exoskeleton would respond to Nex's natural nerve impulses. Each sensor picks up the signal their brain is already trying to send. The exoskeleton just helps deliver that signal to the right place. Young Nyx visited the lab regularly for fittings and tests, their skin patterns always showing excitement at seeing the progress. During one such visit, they watched in fascination as Han Biel assembled a small section of the exoskeleton. "Want to see how it works?" Han Biel asked, as Rin-Ah translated. She helped Nyx touch the components, explaining each part in simple terms. The child's skin patterns glowed with understanding and hope. Late one night, as they worked on final adjustments, Han Biel noticed Rin-Ah's skin patterns showing concern. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting down her tools. "I've been thinking about what happens after the procedure," Rin-Ah admitted. "This could change everything, not just for Nyx, but for how we approach medical treatment. Some of our colleagues are afraid of that change." Han Biel nodded thoughtfully. "Change is always scary. But look at what we've created together." She gestured at their work. "It's not human technology anymore, and it's not purely Terry either. It's something new, something better than either of us could have made alone." The next morning, they presented the completed exoskeleton to the medical board. The device looked deceptively simple, its silvery surface traced with patterns that matched Terry biological structures. Han Biel demonstrated the neural interface, showing how each component had been carefully adapted to work with Terry physiology. "Every part has been tested extensively," she explained, as board members examined the device. "We've run over 1,000 simulations. The safety protocols are redundant, and the entire system can be removed instantly if needed." Elder Myra studied the exoskeleton closely, her aged tentacles gently touching the neural sensors. "Remarkable," she said finally, her skin patterns showing approval. "You've created something entirely new here." As the presentation concluded, Han Biel caught sight of Nyx and their family watching from the doorway. The hope in their eyes reminded her why they had worked so hard. Tomorrow would be the real test, the first attempt to help Nyx walk. But looking at what they had created, Han Biel felt confident. Sometimes the simplest solutions really were the best ones. The morning of the first test arrived with a mix of nervous energy and cautious hope at the Terry Medical Institute. The private medical chamber had been prepared meticulously, its usually stark walls now decorated with calming patterns that shifted in gentle waves. a Terry tradition meant to soothe young patients. Dr. Hanbyle ran through the final checks on the exoskeleton, her movements precise despite having barely slept the previous night. Dr. Rinna stood nearby, her outer membrane rippling with a combination of excitement and anxiety as she monitored the medical equipment. Young Nix lay on the specially designed examination bed, their skin patterns showing a mix of fear and excitement. Their family stood close by, Ambassador Voleur's tentacles intertwined with their mates in a gesture of mutual support. "Are you ready, Nix?" Hanbyle asked softly, as Rinna translated. The child's skin flashed a pattern of agreement, though their lower tentacles trembled slightly. Elder Myra observed from a corner of the room, her ancient skin patterns unreadable as Hanbyle and Rinna began the delicate process of fitting the exoskeleton. The device looked like a delicate silver web as they carefully positioned it around Nix's lower body. "Remember," Hanbyle explained while working, "you might feel some unusual sensations when we activate the neural interface. That's completely normal. Just tell us if anything feels uncomfortable." Each component clicked into place with gentle precision. The neural sensors adhered to Nix's skin, their surfaces shimmering as they adapted to match the child's natural patterns. Even Assistant Director Q1, who had insisted on being present, showed skin patterns of grudging admiration at the elegant design. Neural interface initiating in 3, 2, 1. Rinna announced, her tentacles moving across the control panel. The moment the interface activated, Nix's entire body tensed. Their skin flashed with surprise as new sensations flooded their nervous system. Hanbyle watched the medical readings carefully, her hand hovering over the emergency shutdown switch. "How does it feel, Nix?" she asked. The child's skin patterns shifted through a range of emotions before settling on something akin to wonder. Through Rinna's translation, they expressed amazement at being able to feel their lower tentacles for the first time. "Would you like to try standing?" Hanbyle suggested gently. "We'll help you." With Hanbyle on one side and Rinna on the other, they carefully helped Nix move to the edge of the bed. The child's tentacles trembled, but the exoskeleton provided steady support. Ambassador Valeur moved forward instinctively, their skin showing patterns of protective concern. "It's all right," Rinna assured them. "The support system won't let them fall." Slowly, carefully, Nix slid off the bed. For a moment, they wobbled uncertainly. Then their tentacles found their balance. The room collectively held their breath as Nix stood upright for the first time in their life. The child's skin erupted in patterns of pure joy. Ambassador Valeur's outer membrane flashed with such intense emotion that the patterns nearly blinded the observers. Even Elder Myra's aged skin showed bright patterns of celebration. "Would you like to try taking a step?" Hanbyle asked, still maintaining her calm demeanor despite the tears of joy in her eyes. Nix's first step was wobbly, like a newborn learning to walk. The exoskeleton moved smoothly with them, providing support while allowing natural movement. The second step came easier, and the third easier still. Dr. Rinna's skin flashed with professional triumph as she recorded every moment. The medical readings showed perfect synchronization between the neural interface and Nix's natural nervous system. Everything was working exactly as they had hoped. Halfway across the room, Nix paused and turned toward their parents. Ambassador Valeur and their mate moved forward, their tentacles outstretched. With determination clear in their skin patterns, Nix took several more steps, right into their parents' embrace. The family's skin patterns merged in a beautiful display of joy and love. Hanbyle stepped back, giving them their moment, but Nix called her and Rinna over, their skin patterns insisting that the doctors were part of this triumph too. Assistant Director Q1 cleared his throat, his skin showing unexpected emotion. "I must admit," he said quietly to Elder Myra, "I may have been hasty in my judgment of human medical technology." The elder doctor's skin patterns showed wisdom and satisfaction. "Sometimes," she replied, "we must let go of our preconceptions to achieve true progress." As the initial excitement settled, Hanbladel began running through the post-activation checks, explaining each step to Nix and their family. "You'll need to take it slow at first," she advised. "Think of it like exercising a muscle you've never used before, a little bit each day, gradually building up strength and confidence." Nix barely seemed to hear her, too busy exploring their new ability to move. Their skin patterns showed pure delight as they discovered they could even perform simple Terry dance movements, something they had only ever watched others do before. Dr. Rina's recording devices captured it all. The first steps, the family's embrace, the joy in every movement. She knew this moment would be studied by medical students for generations to come. But right now, watching Nix dance with their parents, none of that seemed to matter. This wasn't just about medical breakthrough or interspecies cooperation anymore. It was about a child experiencing the simple joy of movement for the first time, and perhaps that was the greatest achievement of all. News of Nix's successful treatment spread through Terry space faster than a quantum transmission. Within days, the Medical Institute's communication systems were overwhelmed with requests from families facing similar challenges. Holovids of Nix walking and dancing had gone viral across all major Terry networks, bringing hope to countless others. Dr. Hanbeel found herself standing before increasingly large audiences in the Institute's main lecture hall. Today, the room was packed with medical professionals from across 3 star systems, their skin patterns showing a mix of curiosity and lingering skepticism. "The key isn't in the technology's complexity," she explained, showing a hologram of the neural interface design. "It's in understanding how to work with the body's natural systems rather than trying to override them." In the front row, Dr. Rina watched with pride as her human colleague broke down complex medical concepts into simple, practical explanations. The success with Nix had transformed their partnership into something revolutionary in Terry medical history. Assistant Director Q1, who had once been their strongest critic, now sat quietly among the audience. His skin patterns showed thoughtful consideration as Hanbeel demonstrated the principles behind the adaptive technology. "Look at this neural pathway," Hanbeel continued, highlighting a section of the diagram. "Traditional Terry treatments try to repair it completely. Instead, we created a bypass, like building a bridge over a damaged road, rather than trying to rebuild the entire highway." The audience's skin patterns flickered with understanding. A young doctor raised their tentacles, asking, "But doesn't this mean we're admitting the superiority of human medical technology?" Hanbeel smiled warmly. "Not at all. This isn't about superiority. It's about different approaches working together. Your biological understanding is far beyond ours. We simply offered a different perspective." After the lecture, families would often approach them, their skin patterns showing desperate hope. Each had a story: a child, a parent, a sibling struggling with similar conditions. Dr. Rina worked tirelessly to help evaluate each case, determining which ones could benefit from the hybrid treatment approach. In the Institute's corridors, the old guard of the medical establishment watched as their traditional methods were increasingly questioned. Some adapted, their skin patterns showing excitement at the new possibilities. Others resisted, clinging to centuries of established practice. Elder Myra, however, had become their strongest advocate. "Watch," she told a group of young medical students, her aged skin patterns glowing with wisdom. "Watch how this human doctor approaches each case with fresh eyes, unconstrained by our preconceptions." The impact reached beyond medicine. Ambassador Veller's speeches now often included Nix's story as an example of successful interspecies cooperation. The sight of their child walking confidently beside them at diplomatic functions had more impact than any formal agreement. Late one evening, as Hanbeel and Rina reviewed new cases in their lab, a message arrived from the Terry High Council. The council was considering establishing a permanent human medical consultation program. "Did you ever imagine this would happen?" Rina asked, her skin patterns showing amazement. "When we first started, I thought we'd be lucky just to help Nix." Hanbeel looked up from her work, Surrounded by the mixture of human and Terry technology, it had become normal in their lab. "Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest steps," she replied, smiling at her own unintended pun. Their success had sparked interest from other species as well. Requests for information about the hybrid treatment approach came from medical facilities across known space. Each species presented new challenges, new anatomies to understand, new problems to solve. But perhaps the most significant change was in the Terry medical students. Young doctors now crowded their lab, their skin patterns eager as they learned to combine the best of both worlds. Terry biological expertise with human practical innovation. "The human approach seems so simple," one student commented, studying the exoskeleton designs. "Simple isn't bad," Hanbile replied, showing them how to adjust the neural interface settings. "Nature itself often chooses the simplest effective solution. We're just following her example." As she watched the student work, Hanbile reflected on how far they had come. What had started as a controversial experiment had grown into something that was changing lives across Terry space, not through complex technology or revolutionary discoveries, but through the simple act of looking at old problems in new ways. Outside the lab window, the Terry capital city glowed in the evening light. Somewhere out there, Nyx was probably dancing, their exoskeleton now as natural to them as their own tentacles. And in homes across Terry space, families watched the videos of their success and dared to hope that they too might find help in this new collaboration between species. The universe, it seemed, had much to teach them all about the power of simple solutions. The grand halls of the Terry Medical Institute had changed significantly in the 6 months since Nyx's first steps. Where once sterile medical designs dominated the walls, now vibrant artworks created by patients decorated the corridors. Among them, Nyx's own drawings showed scenes of children, both Terry and human, playing together. Nyx themselves had become a familiar sight in the Institute, their exoskeleton now beautifully decorated with traditional Terry patterns that shifted and glowed in harmony with their skin's emotional displays. The once nervous child now moved with grace and confidence, often stopping to demonstrate their latest dance moves to visiting patients. In the newly established Human Terry Medical Exchange Program's main office, Dr. Hanbluel and Dr. Rinna reviewed applications from both human and Terry medical professionals eager to join their program. The room reflected their successful partnership. Human medical equipment sat comfortably alongside Terry biological interfaces, each complementing the other's strengths. "Look at this," Rinna said, her skin patterns showing excitement as she brought up a hologram. "We've received requests from 17 different medical facilities across both our territories. Everyone wants to learn this integrated approach." Hanbluel smiled, watching through the office window as Nyx played tag with a group of children in the hospital's garden. Some of the children wore similar exoskeletons, each customized to their specific needs and decorated to reflect their personalities. "Remember when Assistant Director Q1 said this would never work?" Hanbluel asked, chuckling at the memory. Rinna's skin flickered with amusement. Now he's requesting to lead the Neural Interface Research Division. Her patterns shifted to show thoughtful reflection. "It's amazing how much has changed in such a short time." The changes extended far beyond the medical field. The success of their program had opened doors for other forms of human-Terry cooperation. Cultural exchange programs flourished, and diplomatic relations had never been stronger. Ambassador Valir often joked that their child had done more for interspecies relations than 100 diplomatic conferences. As they walked through the Institute's gardens, they passed the new training facility where human and Terry medical students learned together. Through the windows, they could see young doctors of both species working side by side, their different approaches creating innovative solutions to once impossible medical challenges. "Dr. Hanbluel, Dr. Rinna." Nyx called out, their skin patterns glowing with joy as they ran over. "Look what I can do." The child performed a complex traditional Terry dance move, the exoskeleton moving as naturally as their own tentacles. "Remarkable," Elder Myra commented, approaching from the garden path. Her aged skin patterns showed deep satisfaction. When I first approved this experiment, I hoped we might help one child. Instead, we've helped reshape the future of medical science itself. The success had inspired other species as well. Requests for collaboration came in regularly from across known space, each bringing new challenges and opportunities. The simple principles that had helped Nix walk were being adapted to help countless others with different physiologies and needs. Later that evening, as Han Buell and Rina prepared for their next joint lecture, they watched a new group of patients arriving at the Institute. Each face showed the same hope they had seen in Nix's family months ago. "You know what makes me happiest?" Rina said, her skin patterns showing deep contentment. "It's not just that we're helping these patients. It's that we're teaching others how to help them too. This will continue long after we're gone." Han Buell nodded, understanding perfectly. That's the real breakthrough, isn't it? Not the technology or the procedures, but the understanding that we're stronger when we work together. Through the window, they could see Nix introducing themselves to a newly arrived patient, showing off their exoskeleton and demonstrating how it worked. The new patient's skin patterns shifted from anxiety to hope as they watched. The simplest solutions really are often the best, Rina mused, her patterns showing amused wisdom. Just like the simplest truth, that compassion and understanding transcend all biological differences. As the two doctors prepared for their next case, they knew they were part of something much bigger than themselves. What had started as one child's journey to walk had become a bridge between species, proving that the greatest advances often come not from technology alone, but from the willingness to learn from each other. In the garden below, Nix continued to dance, their movements a beautiful blend of terry grace and human innovation, a living symbol of what could be achieved when different worlds came together in the spirit of helping others.